Conversation about how to deal with segregation in schools back in 1975. You told a reporter, "I don't feel responsible for the sins of my father and grandfather. I feel responsible for what the situation is today, for the sins of my own generation, and I'll be damned if I feel responsible to pay for what happened 300 years ago." You said that some 40 years ago. But as you stand here tonight, what responsibility do you think that Americans need to take to repair the legacy of slavery in our country?
Well, they have to deal with look, there is institutional segregation in this country. And from the time I got involved, I started dealing with that. Redlining, banks, making sure that we are in a position where, look, we talk about education. I propose that what we take is those very poor schools, the Title I schools, triple the amount of money we spend from 15 to 45 billion a year. Give every single teacher a raise to the equal raise of getting out the $60,000 level. Number two, make sure that we bring in to help the teachers deal with the problems that come from home. The problems that come from home, we have one school psychologist for every 1,500 kids in America today. It's crazy. The teachers are retired. I'm married to a teacher. My deceased wife is a teacher. They have every problem coming to them. We have to make sure that every single child does, in fact, have 3, 4, and 5-year-olds go to school, not daycare, school. We bring social workers into homes of parents to help them deal with how to raise their children. It's not that they don't want to help. They don't know quite what to do.
That is quite possibly the most racist thing that I've ever heard uttered on television. And it was uttered by the Democratic nominee, Joe Biden. Black folks can't raise their kids. It's not that they don't want to, they just don't know what to do. Those darkists just don't know what to do. Keep in mind, this question was talking about the legacy of slavery. Joe Biden, in this question, in this answer, didn't bring up anything in regards to the poor or the disparities in wealth created by the origins and the beginnings of this country. None of that stuff came up. He immediately went to this notion of schools. And even in talking about schools, he says this racist comment that black folks don't know how to raise their kids. I can assure you that black folks can raise their kids every bit as much as whites. Let's be very clear. Joe Biden has a history, though, of doing things that are antagonistic to the black community. That racist crime bill that he put out where the disparity between crack and cocaine was known, and yet they pushed that crime bill through anyway, exploding the black population in prison to disproportionate levels, not to mention the sentences length. Meaning blacks and other races use pot around the same time, but blacks are locked up 4 times as much. Well, if you lock us up 4 times as much, that means there's an emphasis in the policing that's taking place in various communities. Now, the sentencing and getting longer sentences for basically a substance that is almost chemically identical to one another, Biden was at that. Clinton was pushing that. These were Democrats that was pushing these crime bills that got people put in prison for much, much longer sentences otherwise. We have 25 or 5% of the world's population, but we have 25% of the world's prison population in American jails. People in cages, basically gulags. Attacks on Social Security and the safety net are directly attacking the means of people, again, who look like me and who don't look like me, trying to get by. The poverty in this country was dramatically dropped when Social Security was pushed through by FDR. Biden has advocated for cutting Social Security. Obama had advocated for cutting Social Security. Clinton had advocated for privatizing Social Security and would have done so with Newt Gingrich if it wasn't for Monica Lewinsky and that infamous blowjob. But beyond that point, I'm getting to this point that Biden, in the policy agenda, was also antagonistic to African American concerns. Lying about civil rights is big to me, going from one black church to the next, looking one black person in the face and lying to them that he was part of the civil rights movement, despite the fact that in the 80s, he got busted for making the same lie. However, in this year of 2020, the media don't seem to care about that. Sanders didn't do opposition research, or if he did, didn't necessarily bring it up. And so here we are. Joe Biden working with hardcore racists, hardcore singing in the daylight racists, friendships, but also working with them to undermine elements of the civil rights movement. And yeah, blacks can't raise their kids. blacks can't raise their kids. I mean, you can go to the meeting Mandela and all of this other stuff, but at the end of the day, Joe Biden has a history of either saying things that are offensive or at the very least intimidate. Saying things that are relatively offensive or doing things that adversely affect the community that he considers, for whatever reason, his own. Earlier today, you guys have seen this clip. Joe Biden goes on Breakfast Club and says,
now, whether you're for me or Trump and you ain't black.
If you have a problem of trying to figure out whether you're going to vote for me, Joe Biden, or Donald Trump, then you ain't black. You ain't black. Fuck you, first of all. And second, blackness is not determined by you or necessarily anybody else. Charlemagne the God is right here when he pushes back saying, no, the issue is policy that is in my best interest and for my community. And fact of the matter is, if Biden is not going to support policy that is in the interest of this community, then Joe Biden should lose. It shouldn't be this relative thing always to the Republican. There needs to be some level of political or policy integrity into what makes a Democrat, as opposed to just being entirely relative to the Republicans as they speed further and further to the right. Charlemagne the God is right here. Joe Biden is out of his fucking mind, believing that blacks are owed to him. The catch here is his press strategist, Symone Sanders. She used to work for Bernie Sanders, but she's taking that big paycheck with the hopes of getting into the White House, so she's repudiated her previous stances with Sanders, and now she's working with one Joe Biden. Symone Sanders has been trotted out to basically make a bullshit argument that Joe Biden was joking. And in dealing with the mentality that would allow a person to say something like this, she utterly and entirely melts down, entirely missing the point and blocking Chuck Todd from asking actually a pretty decent question. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and of course subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you for allowing me the opportunity to do it. Symone Sanders has to defend comments that people have called racist, people have called stupid, or at the very least offensive, that Joe Biden, for whatever reason, is owed the black vote. And that if he doesn't get that black vote, that you are somehow going to materially, metabolically become a white person or some other race. Ludicrous. Trying to explain and shuck and jive for one Joe Biden, and then melting down when Chuck Todd asks a really good question on the mentality of the individual that would ask a question like that. Shame on you. I suppose you're doing your job and you're getting your paycheck, but basically you're being trotted out here as a black face to defend Joe fucking Biden. Let's listen to the clip.
When he goes off the cuff, he seems to speak with sort of an older generation stereotype at times in some of this stuff. When you've been around him, what would be your explanation to someone who might ask you?
I'm not going to do this.
Why does this happen?
I'm not going to do this. But I'm not going to do this because, Chuck, I'm not going to do this because let me just be really clear. Vice President Biden absolutely has a respect level for all people around him, for voters across this country, young people, older voters, voters of color, black people, Latino voters, indigenous, Asian American, Pacific Islander. So I'm not going to even traffic in any hypothetical conversation about if he is sensitive enough. Look, there are real issues that we have to address in this.
That's not what you were asked. That's not what you were asked. That's not even where Chuck Todd was going. You deflected and changed the question into something else that you prefer to answer as opposed to answering the question that Chuck Todd was asking you. Chuck Todd was getting at Joe Biden, when he makes comments like this, black people can't raise their kids and they need to hear the record player in order to get additional words. Or we need to send social workers into black homes because, again, they can't raise their kids. Or when he's pushing through this racist crime bill, or he's making jokes about foreigners coming into the country or whatever. The point that Chuck Todd is making is that Joe Biden seems to have this kind of white paternal racism that is ingrained in his head. And that's not necessarily a crazy question, since Joe Biden used to be close friends with singing in the day racists and working with those races in order to get certain elements of the civil rights legislation in order to undermine some elements. I guess the point I'm making here, Chuck Todd's question is appropriate. If Joe Biden is basically saying, yeah, you're not black if you don't support me, there are various ways that you can look at that. You could say it's racist, that somebody would ever undermine and delegitimize a person's race in this way by associating it with their vote, and that he himself is the determining factor of your blackness. A white man looking at a black man saying, I am the determining factor of whether or not you're black. That's mind-blowing that shouldn't be okay. And putting her out here in order to defend it. I suppose your campaign had to put about blackface in order to defend some nonsense like this. Symone Sanders argues that Joe Biden was just joking. He was just joking. He was just joshing. He wasn't being serious. No, I think he was being serious. And I think Chuck Todd's question, what Chuck Todd getting at, is apropos. The comments made at the end of the Breakfast Club interview were in jest, but let's be clear about what the VP was saying. He was making the distinction that he would put his record with African-American community against Trump any day, period. It doesn't matter. That's my point. That's precisely my point. It's not about relative distance to the Republican Party as they move further and further to the right. It's about you. It's about you. Do you have any level of political integrity in regards to policy that go beyond just this notion of whatever the Republican Party is as they go streaming to the right, dragging you right along with it? All of this cash pushing you along the way, with lefties basically bowing their heads and with blacks bowing their heads, always voting for these creatures because they're terrified of the other party. But you have nowhere else to go. Argument needs to fall and burn in order for that to stop. If you indeed want to get your policy that is going to materially benefit your community, then the way to do it is to stand under this notion of policy and let the Democratic Party fail if they're not willing to give concessions. Again, if Donald Trump is the apocalypse, how do you justify not giving the concessions of Medicare for all, expansion of Social Security, or for that matter, the elimination of student debt, all three of which are magnificently popular, that much more so by Democrats, meaning 88% for Medicare for all, over 70% for student debt, and I don't remember the exact number, but it's over 50% for expansion of Social Security. He should lose if he's not willing to accept concessions. And it needs to be explained to me why it is better for Joe Biden to not accept concessions to unify the party, as opposed to running against Trump without that group. Meaning, if those concessions are the thing that would allow you to unify the party in order to beat Trump, and Trump is indeed supposedly the walking apocalypse, then how do you justify not accepting those policies in order to beat the person who you're considering to be a walking apocalypse? It is not comparing your record to Trump. What a low bar. The issue is what you are as an individual, as a substance unto yourself, not a relative thing, but a thing unto yourself. And I'm sorry, if Joe Biden is not willing to accept a concession that has 88% support, then you should not support Biden. Your political instrument is broken if you have that many people in your party that is backing that policy and the Democratic Party still says, yeah, no, we're going with Cobra. That means they don't care about your votes. They don't care about what you want. They don't care about whether or not you support them. They have dollars or pitchforks, and they accept that for the longest time, the pitchforks have gone away. They're gone, meaning you don't have dollars. And the lefties, blacks, Hispanics, have been so terrified that they just lump themselves into the party under this myopic pragmatism, missing the point that it's not pragmatic at all if the momentum of your political system is streaming and streaking at top speed to the right. We incentivize this behavior. We make it difficult for people who are lefties to get elected when they can't necessarily see a political instrument that can actually do and succeed at big things that materially benefit their society. Why do you think Sanders had such a hard time as being the risky prospect? Because those people had never seen anything like him in their lifetime, despite the fact that everything that he said in his policies was basically just an old-style Democrat. Shame on you, Symone Sanders. Shame on you. Like, share, and subscribe.